Are we all ready to get started? Yes. Okay, my name is Angela Yee, and I'm really excited to be here for Unbought and Unbossed Conversations. You guys may know me from a little morning show called The Breakfast Club. And one thing that we stress so much on The Breakfast Club is the importance of voting. And as we have been seeing, our voting rights are in danger, and we've seen all kinds of restrictions being put on, people getting discouraged. And so I want to make sure that we stress the importance of that. And this is for the Shirley Chisholm Cultural Institute. I'm from Brooklyn. Shirley Chisholm is from Brooklyn. She's somebody that I look up to and admire. And I'm somebody else I look up to and admire is here with us today. And that is Barbara Bullard, who is the president of the Shirley Chisholm Cultural Institute. So first, let me introduce Barbara, and she wants to talk about the great work that she's doing.
Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Shirley Chisholm Cultural Institute, welcome. As Angela has mentioned, I'm Barbara Bullard, president. In partnership with the Campaign School at Yale University, we're truly excited that tonight our special guest is Congresswoman Barbara Lee. What better way to honor Shirley Chisholm's 50th anniversary of her run for President of the United States of America is to spend time with one of the key people that carried the baton from the little lady from Brooklyn during the final days of Women's History Month. Congresswoman Lee had the foresight at a young age to acknowledge history in the making, having the desire to be a part of that history. To be able to see yourself within the tutelage of greatness is something that we at the Shirley Chisholm Cultural Institute, through innovation, social justice, art, and culture, aspire to support. As Ms. Chisholm would say, you don't make progress by standing on the sidelines, whimpering and complaining. You make progress by implementing ideas. Thank you for joining us. And last but definitely not least, thank you to Congresswoman Barbara Lee and our amazing, awesome SCCI board member, Angela Yee.
Well, thank you. And it's such an honor for me to be here. And before we get to Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who, by the way, I'm like fanning out. So this is exciting for me to be able to host this conversation. I also want to introduce Patricia Patty Russo, who is the executive director of the Campaign School at Yale University.
Thank you so much, Angela. And good evening, everyone. It's thrilling to be here. Our second, number 2 in our series of 4-part series celebrating Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm all year. And it's especially spectacular that we have Congresswoman Barbara Lee here, a leader among leaders in the United States Congress on this issue and so many others that Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm held dear. When I was telling my friend Rosa DeLauro earlier today that I was spending a couple of hours tonight with her great friend, Congresswoman Lee, a force of nature. Give her my love. I love her. So Congresswoman Lee, we love you. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
All right, well, now here's the meat of it. We are going to get to Congresswoman Barbara Lee. And listen, by the way, there's a documentary out about you as well, which is really exciting for people to see and inspirational. So I just want to encourage people to check that out. But Barbara Lee has been representing California's 13th district since 1998. She is the highest ranking African-American woman in Democratic leadership, serving as co-chair of the Policy and Steering Committee. She also serves on the Budget Committee and the powerful Appropriations Committee, which oversees all federal government spending. We've seen how important that is. Her father was a veteran of 2 wars, and her mother broke many glass ceilings and racial barriers. After grammar school, Congresswoman Lee moved to San Francisco, California, and worked with the local NAACP to integrate her high school cheerleading squad. And I saw those pictures too, by the way. As a single mother raising 2 sons, Congresswoman Lee attended Mills College and received public assistance while building a better life for her family. As president of Mills College's Black Student Union, she invited Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm, the first African-American woman elected to Congress, to speak on campus. As a result of this meeting, Congresswoman Lee registered to vote for the first time and worked on Congresswoman Chisholm's historic presidential campaign, including serving as her delegate at the 1972 Democratic National Convention in Miami. In 1975, Congresswoman Lee joined the staff of Congressman Ron Dellums, where she eventually rose from an intern to chief of staff. During the 11 years that she worked for the congressman, Congresswoman Lee was one of only a few women and persons of color to hold a senior position on Capitol Hill. In 2001, Congresswoman Lee received national attention as the only member of Congress to oppose the authorization for the use of military force in the wake of the horrific event on September 11th. I know that was a very lonely time to be that one person. The Congresswoman believed that this AUMF would become a blank check for endless war. As of 2013, this authorization had been used more than 30 times to engage in military action without congressional oversight. Congresswoman Lee is working to repeal this blank check and restore Congress's constitutional oversight to matters of war and peace. She was also an outspoken opponent of the Iraq War. Currently, Congresswoman Lee serves on the Budget Committee and the powerful Appropriations Committee. She is the highest ranking, oh wait, we already did that part. Sorry, to give you all your credit 2 times. So let's go back to the beginning. Congresswoman Lee, first of all, thank you so much for joining us. And I have had a chance to see so much of the work that you've done and just tell you what an inspiration you are to me and to so many people. And so let's go back to how you met Shirley Chisholm and what inspired you about her the most.
Well, let me thank all of you for inviting me to be with you and to be in the presence of an organization, the Shirley Chisholm Cultural Institute, which Shirley Chisholm founded herself. You all are awesome. It's withstood the test of time. And that's so reflective of Shirley Chisholm, who has withstood the test of time, because her spirit, her legacy, and her work still speaks for itself today. And so I'm really happy to be with you. And to the campaign school at Yale, thank you so much. Angela, thank you so much. Is it Patricia? Campaign, what is your name again?
Patty.
Patty, okay, Patty, really good to see you. And I will tell Rosa, she's my chair. And let me tell you, I chair the subcommittee on state and foreign operations. First time an African-American has chaired that subcommittee on appropriations. And that's the subcommittee that determines where our tax dollars are being spent all around the world, everything except defense. That's diplomacy, humanitarian assistance, refugee assistance, everything. And so Rosa's a phenomenal, she's a force of nature, a phenomenal chair. And Johanna is a good friend of mine, our teacher. She teaches each and every day. Every one of us in the house. So, and the rest of your Connecticut delegation is really phenomenal. So I'll tell Pat that I got you. So yeah, Angela, so 1972, I was a community worker with the Black Panther Party, okay? I consciously did not want to register to vote. It wasn't like I was apathetic. I knew exactly what I was doing because politics didn't seem to mean anything because it wasn't changing my life or the lives of people like me. I was a single mother on public assistance, raising 2 small boys, former victim of domestic violence, just barely hanging on, right? But I was determined that I was going to contribute back to my community. So I worked with the Black Panther Party with Huey Newton, Elaine Brown, Bobby Seale, did a heck of a lot of work with the Panthers, and worked as, of course, chair of the BSU, Black Student Union. Mills is a very phenomenal, well, now it's a merger, but I don't even want to talk about that, but it was phenomenal women's college. And I felt like it was very wealthy that the Black Student Union and Mills hadn't done enough in the Oakland community. So part of my work with the BSU was to bring the Black Student Union to some reality about Black people in Oakland and what the Panthers were doing. So at the same time, I heard about it and I had a class in government. I'm just telling you kind of the background. And I've only taken 1 class in government, mind you, 1 class. And I've been in Congress 23 years and worked for a member of Congress 11 years, 1 class. So part of our course assignment that year was to work in a presidential campaign. It was McGovern, Muskie, Humphrey, all those guys. And I just told my teacher, flunked me. I never flunked a class before. I said, these guys do not reflect anything that makes any sense to Black people, people of color, and to me as a woman, and me as a woman, me as a Black woman. No, no way. So I was going to flunk the class. And, she said, well, that's what you want to do. So at the same time, though, I read about Shirley Chisholm. I knew she was the first Black woman elected to Congress. So I invited her to Mills campus under the auspices of the BSU, not knowing at all that she was running for president. I just wanted Black people and the women at Mills and the community to get to meet this phenomenal woman. Mind you, the first Congress was in session, into session in 1789, okay? Never have we had a Black woman elected to Congress until 1968. Just like since 1789, we've never had a Black woman on the Supreme Court. God willing, and the work that we're doing, we will. But can you imagine how the country has lost out on so much, not having the perspective, the lens, the energy, the brilliance of Black women in these bodies? So anyway, I knew that about Shirley Chisholm, and I wanted to meet her and to have her speak to encourage the community to learn more about who she was. So she talked about in her speech that she was running for president. I couldn't believe it. I mean, but she also spoke fluent Spanish. She talked about poverty. She was an educator. She was against the Vietnam War. She was pro-choice. She was one of the first board members of the National Association of Reproductive NARAM. Okay, I mean, and she was a coalition builder, and she was fighting for not only women, white women, women of color, Black women. She was also fighting to end racial justice, racial injustices, and systemic racism. So she was a Black woman who was fighting to change the system so that people who've been marginalized would have equality and justice. And so I went up and told her about my class. And she took me to task with her tough love. I don't know if anybody, Pat, did you ever know her? Anybody ever know her? She was like, okay, little girl. And to the day she died, she called me little girl. And I had two little boys there and all. But she told me, that's not good enough. You've got to register to vote. She said, you've got to get on the inside, or at least get politically active, because if you don't, who's going to do it? She said, they're going to make decisions about your life. And we need Black women to get involved. And she used herself as an example. So she kind of forced me to register to vote. But then I told her about my class. And she was really excited. I'll never forget about this class. I said, yeah, they want me, I'm gonna flunk it. I said, but now that I heard you, man, you're running, I'll go back and talk to my professor. I said, but tell me, how do I get involved with your campaign? Once she convinced me to register to vote. She said, little girl, she said, that's, and I have a tape with her when she came to California in 1996, when I won the state Senate seat. And she said, little girl, I always call her little girl, right? I don't know how old I was then, but I wasn't a little girl. Even when I met her, I wasn't a little girl. So anyway, so she told me, I don't have a local campaign. I don't have money. It's not a national campaign, but I know I have local people who support me. So, she said, I would love your help. Okay, so I went back to my class, told my professor, I said, how do I do this? I reconsider flunking the class. Literally, this is about me flunking the class and really liking Shirley Chisholm and what she stood for. And my professor said, that's part of the course work. You've got to figure that out yourself. I said, I'm barely registered to vote. I don't know what to do. She said, well, if you want to pass this class, you've got to figure it out. Bottom line is, I organized her Northern California primary out of my class at Mills College with two other students. One was another student who was student body president at Mills. The other ended up being my chief of staff. He was a student body president at a community college, Laney College. And I got an A in the class.
Hey.
I went to Miami as a Shirley Chisholm delegate. I registered to vote, and the rest is history. So it was that one woman who mentored me from then on. I mean, it was like, she saw something in me I didn't even see. But she convinced me, and she told me also that, Barbara, when you get on the inside of wherever, corporate America, wherever, your business, nonprofit, the government, she said, don't go along to get along. She said, if you get in and break through as a Black woman, she said, your job is to change the rules of the game, because those rules weren't made for women. They weren't made for Black people. They weren't made for poor people. They weren't made for you. So you can't just get on the inside and think you're something. She said, you got to get on the inside and dismantle all of those systems. And that's what I've been trying to do ever since then.
There's so much that you just talked about, and I don't even know where to start, but I do want to talk about the fact that you weren't registered to vote at first, right? And I hear so many people in the line of work that I do saying that they don't think that their vote matters, saying that these elections are rigged anyway, saying that this doesn't represent us. And so I just want to get from you, what do you say when people say, well, my vote doesn't count? What's going to happen is going to happen. This doesn't even affect us. I still don't have the things that was promised to me from the president. And they're not realizing how important local politics are and also how the process works.
Yeah, and I can relate to that because that's who I was. And it's hard. So I always tell people, yeah, I know what you mean. This is a generational struggle for justice. Being enslaved for 256 years, left the scar on this country. It's in its DNA, and we're trying to dismantle that in terms of reparations, in terms of telling the truth, in terms of the historical context. And so this is a generational fight, I say. But look at how far we've come, okay? When I started school, and I use that reference, I couldn't go to public schools because I was Black. My mother almost died in childbirth because they wouldn't admit her into the hospital. I almost didn't get into this world because she was Black. Now I'm a member of Congress, right? I made it. I've been fighting each and every day. And so it's not about just today, which I know people need a lot of affirmation and need accountability from their elected officials. But believe you me, it matters. We would not be seeing Ketanji Brown Jackson about to be our next Supreme Court justice had it not been for that fact that Black folks voted for Joe Biden. I mean, come on. If this is not an example of the relationship there between voting and having someone elected and holding them accountable, I don't know what is. If we did not have, and I don't want to keep referring to myself, but I'm just sharing what I do. I co-chair the Cannabis Caucus, and I am so sick of these marijuana offenses and people being put in jail and these convictions on their records. And so I'm trying to deschedule marijuana and provide for restorative justice, for business opportunities and equity in that space. And we're making a difference. We're getting there. Okay. But if I hadn't been elected, you think anybody would take that up? I took this Marijuana Justice Act like 8 or 9 years ago, and the Congress is about to pass it on Friday again. Senate, we still have to do more work in the Senate. And so when you look at tangibles, do you think that there would have been, and we need more? Now, I'm not saying everything, is rosy, because people are suffering right now, and the cost of living is so high. The cost of gasoline is too high. Inflation is rampant. But that's not because we elected Joe Biden. That's because of the history of Donald Trump and the huge Trump tax cuts that they gave away to wealthy millionaires and billionaires. But you know what? Hillary Clinton lost by 70 or 80,000 votes. And when you look at the precincts where she lost in Michigan, these were precincts that had primarily people of color who did not vote. And so we got Donald Trump, okay? And so I'm just saying, this is not something that happens overnight, but we have to be in it for the long haul. And so I'm urging my brothers and sisters and people who think that politics doesn't matter. It matters, but you're the ones that have to hold elected officials accountable, and you're the ones who have to go and make sure that they do what you elected them to do. I was at the White House earlier. We're talking about what all promises were made in the Democratic Party platform. Okay, where are we on those promises? Are we moving forward or not? Do we get an A, B, and C? What more do we need to do? We had a horrific COVID crisis. Had it not been for members of the Congressional Black Caucus, we wouldn't have had the targeted resources going into Black and brown communities that needed the vaccines, that needed the contact tracing, that needed the community health clinics funded. Do you think that would have happened if people hadn't voted for me and for members of the Black Caucus or for Democrats? No. And so, and I don't want to keep, because I'm not that enthusiastic about the Democratic Party because it's not still progressive enough for me. But my job as a member of the DNC and the highest ranking African-American woman in Congress is to push the Democratic Party to where racial justice and gender equity is like a theme, a policy position, which the platform has, but we want to see it enacted. So I'm just like taking this opportunity to plead with people. And I'm glad Pat, the campaign school at Yale, I'll do anything I can do to get people just like Shirley did with me, just to take that one step to register to vote and to vote, and don't leave it alone there. Keep at it, you know, keep involved, keep engaged. And finally, I'll just say, when you look at what's happening with that tyrant Putin, what he's doing in Ukraine, okay, his goal is to dismantle democracies around the world, starting in Ukraine and Eastern Europe. That does not mean that that's over there. Steve Bannon was in Germany with some of these right-wing extremists when I was there a couple of years ago from the Trump White House. The misinformation and disinformation campaign that went on, especially when Trump won, that's connected to the worldwide struggle to preserve democracy. Do you not think, I was sitting on the floor, January 6th wasn't part of the whole effort by white supremacists here connected to the people in these authoritarian regimes to overthrow the United States government? You don't think that's connected? Come on. Right. And so if you want to preserve what semblance of democracy is left, we have got to vote. We have got to make sure that the autocrats don't take over. And I mean, this is really connected. And so I'm pleading with people, because it's a state of emergency, if you ask me, in terms of democracy versus autocracies. And Putin's move on Ukraine and his viciousness and his brutal slaughter of the Ukrainian people shows how dedicated they are to do that. So we better be just as dedicated here in this country to preserving democracy. And that means we've got to vote. That means we have to register to vote, and you vote for candidates who are going to, one, fight to preserve democracy, two, fight to make sure our communities, that we repair the damage by supporting reparations and all of the equity issues in all of our policies and programs, and three, stay engaged, because democracy functions only when people are engaged with those people you elect. And so, you know, I'm to stop now, but I get really not upset, but I get, because I know how I was. And I know it took a lot to get me to do what I'm doing, but I'm really glad I did, because I hope I'm making an impact in people's daily lives. And that's what it's about, changing the world, making life better for everybody, and justice.
And Congresswoman Lee, we love that you are so passionate about what you speak of and where you come from, and to see where you are now, because that is a lot of people's journey. And even certain things that you fight for, you know, protecting people from domestic violence and reproductive rights. We see all of these things right now that are in danger. And so I just wanted to talk about firsts, right? Because you did mention some firsts that are still happening. And even for yourself, what are the spaces that you can tell us where you've been the first Black woman, or the first Black person, or the first woman?
And believe you me, being the first, I had to fight like crazy, but it wasn't about me just being the first. It was about, look, I got to break down this door so that other, you know, Black women and women of color and women can follow. And so you always have to lift as you climb. And so I've never thought it was just about me. And I guess I should start with when I wanted to be a cheerleader at age 15. I would not tolerate the fact that this committee was established to select cheerleaders, and you had to be blonde and blue-eyed. I said, hell, I don't look like that, and I want to be a cheerleader. So I, at age 15, went to the NAACP, said, I want to be a cheerleader, and it's wrong. This is unjust, and I want to be a cheerleader. What can I do? The NAACP, and this is how mentors and older people can help younger people. They looked at it, they said, yeah, you're right. And they helped me organize. They taught me how to organize, okay? And they helped me. And we organized so much that the school got really afraid of what was gonna happen. And the administration decided we better change the rules and how cheerleaders are selected. So what they did, they established new rules. Again, NAACP and Barbara Lee, pushing, raising cane, marching, protesting. peacefully, where the student body had a chance to elect cheerleaders. That's how they changed the rules, right? So I tried, and it wasn't there are very few Black girls at my school. But I tried out in front of the student body and I won. That was my first election. But that same year, a Japanese American girl won, right? That same year, I think a Latina won. And so, you know, I broke that down at 15 years old. I mean, that was an election, voting, okay? So I was voted in as cheerleader. So that was one of the times. Next, Lord, it's been crazy in terms of being some of the first. Like, I was one of the first Black women to really get engaged in the pro-choice movement early on, trying to bring the white women's movement. And I saw this during Shirley Chisholm's campaign, the real schism between white women and Black women in the Black community, because white women didn't recognize how reproductive freedom was really reproductive justice for Black women, and that we had to fight for justice also as it relates to reproductive rights. And so it was a white woman's middle class movement. But I got in there early on and worked to try to broaden the pro-choice movement. I mean, this took me decades, right? And I didn't just go to rallies and marches. I mean, I worked like crazy, meeting, going over issues with the white women's groups and saying, look, you've got to support Black women and our issues also. So we finally had some breakthroughs, thanks to All Above All coalition, in terms of coming up with legislation to repeal the Hyde Amendment, which is an amendment that denies access to reproductive health, the full range, including abortions, to low-income women, which are majority Black and brown women. That was put into place in '76. Well, no one would touch repealing it until I came to Congress, right? I worked with these young women around the country who understood Democrats were squeamish. They said, oh, no, that's the Holy Grail. You can't go there. Hyde is Hyde, you know. Sorry about that, but you know, you can't talk about it. So it took me forever to finally get the quote leadership. Now I'm part of the leadership, but then I wasn't, to sit down with me and say, we're going to repeal the Hyde Amendment. We're going to introduce the EACH Act. We introduced it and folks thought we would have 2 or 3 co-sponsors. Got 30 the first year, okay, and built. Now we have probably about 165 co-sponsors on the EACH Act, which would fully repeal the Hyde Amendment. But also, first, I serve on the Appropriations Committee. I'm on the subcommittee on Labor, Health, and Human Services. Every single year, the Hyde Amendment, again, that denies access to abortion care by low-income women, would be put into the labor bill that Rosa DeLauro chairs. Well, we finally, last year, though that bill moved off the floor of the House without the Hyde Amendment in it, without the Helms Amendment, which is the International Hyde Amendment. Okay, this was the very first time that we repealed it since 1976. Okay, got it in the Senate, and of course, that's another problem. But we got it through the House. That was historic, and it had never been repealed in the House. So now we have to start all over this year, but we're going to, and I'm hoping all of you register to vote and hold these senators accountable wherever you live. Tell them they've got to repeal the Hyde Amendment because it's racist, it's discriminatory, and it keeps low-income women and Black women and brown women from accessing abortion care. And now with the Supreme Court decision, this coming down that probably will end Roe versus Wade, this is a matter of life and death. And so you tell all those people out there, they've got to do it. But that's another first, okay, that I had to just take on like you would not believe. Then the authorization to use military force. That was a blank check, 60 words after the horrific events of 9/11. And my father was a military officer, 25 years in the military. So I'm not looking at the world through rose-colored glasses, but I know that the military option should be your last option. And I know 3 days after the horrific attacks, the country was in mourning, grieving, afraid, anxious. There is no way any Congress should vote to do anything except mourn the loss and see how we could help those who were injured. And they came up with this authorization that was 60 words, and it says in essence, the president is authorized to use force wherever, whenever, forever. I said, you can't do this because the Constitution requires members of Congress to authorize force whenever the president is contemplating going to war. I said, what the heck? It was hard because death threat, I mean, still it's dicey out here. I voted no, and that was the right vote. My father called me after he saw it on CNN and all. He said, that's the right vote. You do not send young people in harm's way without knowing what the heck you're doing. And so my dad, okay, but all hell broke loose, and it was really hard for me, really hard. But death threats, people called me a traitor, the whole 9 yards. It was mean. It was terrible. At Mills College, I have 60,000 communications from people all around the world. I've housed them there. So journalists and academics can come in or whoever and study the viciousness of people. The fact that no one really, I won't say no one, that those who opposed it didn't understand that that the right to dissent is central in the democracy. They were saying, oh, you should have been unified. You can't do this. We were under threat. Forget democracy. Forget, having a dissenting opinion. Not now. So it taught me a lot about people. But on the other hand, Bishop Tutu, Coretta Scott King, you should read some of the letters that came in the comments. And so I would say it's probably 60% mean, and the other 40% were really very supportive. And finally, now, here we are, 2022, I got it repealed in the House of Representatives 3 or 4 times, got it to the Senate, and they messed up again. So we didn't get it to the president's desk. But coming back to the Democratic Party platform, I actually wrote into the platform, I was a drafter, 15 of us, that the president supports repealing these authorizations, Iraq in 2001. And so the president actually submitted what we call a SAP, Statement of Administrative Policy. When I was debating it on the floor, there comes this note saying the president supported this. So I'm just sharing that because that was another first, being the only one. But now, the members who voted, who are still here, who voted for it, begging me to come to their districts because they need some cover, right?
Right.
But now they understand it. But that's why I'm saying to young people, you have to step out there if you believe you're right, okay? Or if you believe in something, don't say just because it may not happen or because others are going in one way, going with the flow, you have to go with the flow. Stand your ground.
Yes.
Stand your ground and persevere. I gave this message in my church Sunday morning, and I do not like speaking from the pulpit. I brought Shirley Chisholm to my church twice, right, when I was campaigning. But it was Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1-6 about perseverance, and God loves you because he knows that means you have faith in him. I'm just paraphrasing this. If you persevere. And so that's what Black people and women have to do, is persevere. This mess is not going to change overnight, but you got to persevere. And in the end, the reward is be there and you'll see change.
Congresswoman Lee, along with all of that, being the only person getting those death threats, I know we talk about self-care a lot more today than we used to, but how do you handle that? And what was your self-care routine like? Because I can't even imagine having to be in a situation like that. I have it rough sometimes, but I mean, that is like next level.
Well, no, I'm a person of faith, and I said my prayers. And there was a scripture in Ephesians, you put on the full armor of God, and when all hell breaks loose and you just stand. And literally, that's what I did. And family members, my loved ones, my constituents, they came around. And so it was the support of people. And you should have seen the attacks. And when you see some of the stuff people wrote, the nastiness, it was bad. Someone called my landline and shot gunshots into the voicemail. I mean, it was terrible. But, self-care, I'm by profession psychiatric social worker, so I understand all this stuff. But being in it is a little different, but I had to draw on, everything that I knew about emotion, psychology, prayer, spirituality. I love my plants. I grow orchids. I love my music. I love my grandkids. You know what I mean? So I have another life too. Not enough of that other life then. And my mother, she passed away 7 years ago, but she was one of those who stood with me day and night. And just was unbelievably supportive. So it took all of that. It takes a village. And yeah. And so fast forward to now, just in reflection about that, 9/11, because 9/11, I was sitting in the Capitol and had to evacuate that morning when Flight 93, they thought was coming to the Capitol. I wore heels that day. And on January 6th, I went sitting at the Capitol. I don't want to digress too much, but I just want to tell you what faith is about and what you have to do.
No, please tell us.
Right there on the floor, I had been reading all the right-wing blogs. I don't know why the security and the FBI and the National Guard didn't know what was happening. I knew something terrible was going to go down. I didn't know what, but I was sitting right there in front of it. And I wore my tennis shoes that day because as a Black person, my antenna is up. Like on 9/11, I got caught, had to evacuate with heels. No, I said, January 6th, I don't know what's going down. Never expected what went down the way it went down, but I wore my tennis shoes. and that was another test of my faith because it almost was a mass casualty event and we barely got out of it, just seconds. So, that's what happens when you're out there. You have to protect yourself, do everything you can do for self-care. You have to take time to do whatever you do, meditate, take time to however you experience life. I love nature. I love plants, flowers, walking, whatever you like to do, music. I like writing. I wrote a book in 2008. I like reading. I like reading love stories, novels, so whatever it takes, but you just don't work 24/7 and not take a break and take care of yourself and go have your physicals, keep up on your vaccination. Just little stuff. And so many mental health problems now as a result of COVID and all the stress that especially Black people go through. The trauma has all come up surface during COVID. So use your mental health services. We're fighting now to get more money in mental health services. Don't shy away from psychotherapy or counseling. If you feel something that you need, just know that's normal and call somebody and figure out a way to get some counseling and therapy because it's extremely important. So all of those skills, well, not skills, but efforts from skilled people who know how to help, take advantage of, do that.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I know we're off script a little bit, but I feel like this is so important to discuss. And since we have you here, I do appreciate you just being so open with us about your own experiences. And, we do want to talk about the opening words of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. I'm going to read that. In our system, the first right and the most vital right of all our rights is the right to vote. This is the ark of our safety. Why does it seem like our voting rights are in more danger now than ever? And what is Congress doing to make sure that we can protect those rights?
Well, they are in danger now more than ever. And we have passed several times the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act in the House, and we've passed the Freedom to Vote Act in the House. So because our voting rights are so threatened, and look at all these states, they're passing voter suppression laws to deny, and look at redistricting. So they're trying to take America back to the days of Jim Crow and beyond. And so we have to, again, why we have to vote, register to vote, we have to get the Senate and more members in the House. But right now, we've got to get these senators to pass these bills because we have to have federal protections against what's happening in the states. Each state has their own voting laws, which is fine. But when it comes to constitutional rights, the federal government is responsible to ensure that we have constitutional rights. And right now, because of Donald Trump, and because of the white supremacists, and because of the big lie, people are primarily Republicans are doing everything they could do to create scenarios where either voter suppression is part of their scheme or denying people access to the poll, like not being able to drink a glass of water if you're standing in line for 5 hours, making it harder and harder and harder to vote. So when you make it hard to vote, we got to have federal laws. And so that means political action. That means these senators who are on the fence, that means organizing in West Virginia and Arizona. There were 16 members of the Senate who were here when George Bush signed the voting rights renewal. And I was here, it was 2006, I think. And so this means 16 Republicans. Look at where they live, find out who's in their constituency, and go to their offices, demand that they vote, support the Voting Rights Act. So we've got to be very strategic to get this passed. Otherwise, I worry about the elections coming November. And so this takes engagement of those who don't see why voting matters, because it matters. And finally, let me say, I remember the poll tax in Texas. I was born and raised in El Paso, Texas. I know what it's like when Black people and older people can't vote, how horrible that is. They had to pass laws to end the poll tax. You'd have to count all the jelly beans in a gallon bottle or stuff like that, or name all the cities in a county in Maine. So I'm just saying, this is a new form of the poll tax, what's taking place. And so John Lewis, all those people who, and I know it's so cliche-ish now to say fought and spilled their blood on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, who fought for voting rights. I mean, hey, those were young people there. They were in their teens and 20s. Okay, so let's not leave them out there. They did everything they could do and had to do, and it's up to us now. It's up to you guys to do it.
And I always say another form of voter suppression is people convincing you that it doesn't matter and that your vote doesn't count. That is voter suppression when you start to believe that and push that narrative. And
the Russian bots are right there pushing it. And I'm telling you, this narrative is not necessarily a narrative coming from Americans. It's a narrative that the Russians have perpetrated, the bots, and created a scenario and influencers in this country to do that, to try to influence and tell you it's not important. So just know, when you believe that stuff, you're really listening to Putin.
right. And, you can just see that with the fact that the 2020 federal election drew the United States' highest turnout. And for the first time in history, people were inspired to vote that hadn't before. But then immediately after that, 19 states have enacted 33 laws that will make it harder for Americans to vote. So how can we inspire people to care, not just about the big elections, but also about the ones that get less turnout and what is at stake in the next elections?
Yep. Listen, school boards, please, whoever's on this call, please run for school board. If you have people in your areas who are mean-spirited and are trying to deny access to information about our history, who are trying to use critical race theory as a bogus argument for whitewashing our history, I'm just saying, please run for office at all these levels. School boards, city councils, local agencies. I mean, Black people, women of color, need to get involved and run for, and we're seeing a shift. I mean, Pat, we're seeing a shift in this country now, because a lot of young people are saying, we ain't waiting. We're just going to do it. And that's what we need to do. Just do it. Run, take it over. If your elected official is not doing the right thing, figure out ways to run and defeat them. And you got to do that at all levels.
And if you feel like you're not the right person, if you see somebody that you think would be great to run for office, encourage that, put together your group of people to uplift them and help organize. And I think, that goes a long way too. If you're like, you know what, you would be great at whatever, I think we should encourage people who we feel like are leaders in our communities to run for office.
I had never run for office, and everybody was shocked when I ran. I didn't really want to. The community came to me because I had been behind the scenes as a chief of staff to our beloved Ron Dellums. And when the assembly seat opened up in 1990, the community just said, look, you've got to run. I said, no, I've worked for the master, Ron Dellums. I mean, it's like, I don't need to run for office. I'm work for, I had 350, 400 people. And it was like, I'm going to stay active. I'm active politically, supporting candidates, but I don't need to run for office. They somehow bogarted me into running for office. And they did. I did not want to do it. And let me tell you, because I hadn't run for office, because I was a Black woman, everyone knew me because I was staff, right? constituent services, the whole bit. But to translate that and to come forward as a candidate was really hard. And Shirley Chisholm came out and helped me, but it was really hard. And so she actually told me, Barbara, she says, I'm going to send you some clothes. I was then probably a size 10. She was still a 3. But she saw I was running around campaigning with my t-shirts and my cap and my jeans. And she was so prim and proper. She said, I think I need to send you some clothes. You've got to look like a candidate, right? I mean, it was traumatic for me. And so, but I had to do it my way because I couldn't raise the amount of money that I needed to win. So my mother and my sister, they registered people to vote at bars because they hung out in bars. They managed my company, right? Lee Associates. They knew every bar in town. They were very conscious politically, and they just loved people. So after work, a few nights a week, they'd go to these bars and they'd have a good time, right? And they'd pull me in there, even though I don't drink. I haven't had a drink even of wine since the early 80s. But my mother and sister would have me come down, just sit and talk to people, and I loved it. But that's how I got elected. That's how I raised the money. That's who registered to vote. So when the campaign came around, the person who was running against me had been on the city council, boom, boom, boom. Nobody expected me to win, but they didn't know I had the people. I had the brothers and sisters at the beauty shops, at the barbershops, at the bars. You just name it. It was like a stealth campaign because I had to do it my way because there wasn't no traditional support there for me.
So what does unbought, unbossed mean to you then?
What unbought and unbossed?
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean? Boy, don't let money, given dark money and given how money rules right now in politics, find your own way to raise money, okay? And even if you raise money from PACs or places where you may or may not like, don't think that, make them know that's not your agenda. You're going to have your own agenda based on the people's agenda, right? If you take money from corporations or corporate PACs, that's the, be your own person, be who you are. Because when you get elected, people elect you because of who you are, not because of the money and who the money came from and all that. So you got to be yourself and live up to your commitments. And then being unbossed is like, you have to negotiate. I hate to say compromises, but sometimes you have to give up something. So that's why being progressive, I'm a left, they call me a lefty, but I'm a progressive. I start way out there. And when I was in the legislature, it was really clear. If you started on the left, I had a right-wing governor, right? Who started on the right. He was really right-wing, Pete Wilson. What happened though, is because I was on the left, I got more bills signed into law than anybody in my freshman class. And that's because I had space to negotiate, you know? So I made some compromises, some deals, but I didn't give up my values and I didn't give up what the bottom lines were. But if I started in the middle like this, he's over here, there's no place to go but to the right. And so I think that's really important to remember. And so you start where you want to start. You don't let the lobbyists, don't let anyone tell you that they own you. Okay, or because they contributed to you, you better listen to their agenda. You know who you are, you know how you got elected, you know your values and what your agenda is, and don't let anybody else tell you because you know the heartbeat and you know the needs of the people.
Congresswoman Lee, for people who are watching this, what is the best way for the average person to get heard, right? Sometimes people feel like their local elected officials aren't accessible. So what do you tell people when they're like, well, I don't even know how am I supposed to even talk to my congressperson?
Go to my district and ask them how they talk to me. Boy, I have the most active district in the world. Now, before COVID, of course, you see how many people show up in my district. Look at the rallies and protests. Look at the emails and the texts I get. Look at good and casework. I mean, good casework, helping people through the federal government, through the agencies, because that's my job. Helping people should be part, and it is part of my job, being a social worker, helping people every day. And so go to your member of Congress's office and demand. I mean, I have so many people from other districts calling me and saying, would you do this? Would you do that? I said, well, have you called your congressperson? Have you talked to their staff? Well, who is it? I said, dang. So first, know who they are. If you
Right.
like them, get involved in their campaign. If not, don't try to run people against them. But every day I get people from all over the country asking me to do congressional record, memorials. Would you help me with my passport? I mean, way outside of my district. And I said, look, who's your congressman? Well, I don't know. Should I know? Yeah.
Like, I know you.
So that's the first thing. Know who they are and go sit in their office and go get to know their staff. As a former staffer, that's who does the work. That's who makes the recommendations to whatever elected official you're engaged with. Get to know the staff. Be honest. If I catch somebody telling me a lie, oh my goodness, or tricking me or putting me in a trick bag, and I mean, we have ethics issues we have to comply with, rules, regulations. I'll always say, check with ethics. Is it okay to do? Give me a written opinion. Don't push the envelope on something you think may borderline on some gray areas on ethics. So, you've got to be awoke. You got to be woke all the time.
And if things do go well for Democrats in the midterms, do you think that the John Lewis Voting Rights Act is back on the table? Is that happening?
Well, it's still on the table. So we're looking at ways to maneuver this. But we've got to grow, we've got to keep the House and elect more members. And we have some really phenomenal women of color and Black women running around the country. And we've got to grow the Senate. I have to hold on to the Senate, but we need at least 5 or 6 more senators. And a couple of Black women running for the Senate who can win. Val Demings out of Florida, she can win big time. Sherry out of North Carolina, Sherry's last name. But anyway, she former judge, she can win. There's several other African Americans who can win the U.S. Senate seat, and 2 Black women for sure. North Carolina and Florida. And so we have to work. For all of you listening, if you're not engaged with somebody's campaign, I would say get to Val Demings or get to the North Carolina Sherry's campaign and try to help them out.
All right. Now, last year we did celebrate the 50th anniversary of the passing of the 26th Amendment, which lowered the voting age to 18. So tell me what I and the people who are watching can do to inspire the youth. We need the young people.
Her last name, I just see it up in the chat. Sherry Beasley. Beasley's her last name in North Carolina. Okay, thank you.
Now, let's talk about getting the youth and inspiring them to be active voters, get them involved, make them part of the movement. What are some things that we can do to inspire the youth to be more involved?
Student debt cancellation, get youth to school debt, organize around that. We're getting close, but we need more voices out there of young people and of students to say, cancel student debt. We need that. And rally around issues that you care about and make a difference. So between now, I don't know what will inspire anyone if Democrats losing, knowing what Trump was like. I mean, I hope that inspires people for no other reason, and to see how we've saved lives and livelihoods as a result of COVID. Millions more would have died. Millions more would have gotten the virus and been in worse shape. And many would have not been able to bounce back in terms of the economy and their job. So just know, hopefully, and we don't look back too much, but we have to talk about what we've done to impact your life. The eviction moratorium helped a heck of a lot of people, All the housing issues helped a heck of a lot of people. So I think what should inspire people is our agenda, Democrats' agenda, but look at what would have happened had we not done what we did. And so don't just take this for granted. Don't take your reproductive rights for granted. Don't think that it's Roe versus Wade is going to be here. There's so many women who don't know a world without Roe. That's on the line now. You will know it after the Supreme Court rules. And so you better get engaged so that you can get us, so we can pass the Women's Health Protection Act in the Senate, which codifies Roe versus Wade, which would be the law of the land. So there's a lot to inspire women. Cannabis reform,
Yes.
Go for legalization, go for medical marijuana, go for descheduling, go for get involved in engaging around the MORE Act that we're gonna pass here Friday in Congress. Get your candidates, find some candidates who may or may not support marijuana reform, cannabis reform. It's so important for a lot of reasons, but the criminal justice part of this and what we need to do to expunge records. I mean, my district, I've started expungement conferences like 10 years ago to expunge records of those who had marijuana convictions. In this bill, we expunge all the records. This is a big criminal justice issue. Young people should galvanize, organize, and mobilize around cannabis reform. I'm telling you, it's an issue that posed really well with young people.
And do you think we'll see a time when people can vote like on a phone app, maybe in the future?
I
You
hope
see that
so.
happen?
I hope so. We got to make it easier and easier and easier. In California, and some states have all mail-in ballots. I mean, you can go to polls if you want to, but you can certainly just mail it in. So we got to make voting easier. We really do.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
yeah,
I know.
good idea, really.
I know we do have some questions that we want to make sure that we get to. Look, I know you're super.
Because I have one more. Wait a minute. How much time do we need?
I think, I mean, you know, with this part, Barbara, I don't know if you wanted to say something.
Okay, give me,
Barbara?
can we do 10 more minutes?
Yeah, I think.
Okay,
that's
Barbara,
fine.
yeah.
I want to make sure we get to
Couple
some,
more
questions.
We love you. Yes, 10 more.
I love being with you.
We don't want to let her go.
Yeah, no, I mean, in fact, I'm just excited that you were able to spend this much time with us. So this really is an honor. So here's a question from an anonymous attendee. It's an honor to listen to you, Congresswoman. My question is, how do you maintain your bipartisan spirit while moving the conversation on racial justice issues?
Well, I want to get the work done. I want to see change occur. And it's hard given all these people who voted not to certify the elections of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. So, but I have to work with them. And like on cannabis reform, I have two Republican co-chairs. Well, one, Don Young, he just passed away. But we have to work in a bipartisan way on HIV and AIDS. I worked with George Bush, big time. PEPFAR, all those initiatives were my initiatives that I worked with George Bush on. So, you know, if you really want to change the world and get things done, if you have people who disagree with you, now I'm not talking about people like, you know, who's Boebert and all green, you know, there's some that you just can't talk to because they're in another world. The cult, you know, anyone who's bought into the big lie like that and part of the cult, it's very difficult because to deal with cults, you have to deprogram people. And so that's another story, another talk. But with Republicans that you can get something done with, you have to go in there believing it can be done. And you may get it done. I've done a lot with cannabis. You go see that bill passed with HIV and AIDS, with global health. You know, we've done a lot with Republicans, even in the last few years, which no one knows about because all you see is the nastiness, the bickering, and the almost like meltdowns that are taking place. But and you can't take anything personally. That's the other thing. Initially, a long time ago, I used to take a lot personally. I'm pretty tough now. If they say something to me, I'm not going to hit below the belt, but I'm going to punch back and stand my ground on what's right and move on. But I think it's always worth a try to work. And I'm with Congresswoman Mace. I've got legislation now with her, a Republican woman, to get the United Nations. Actually, I spoke before the General Assembly at the UN yesterday. First time a Black member of Congress has done that, or a woman. So anyway, we're trying to get the UN to deschedule marijuana worldwide. Okay, and I have a Republican partner doing that. I have a Republican co-chair of the HIV/AIDS caucus. So, you know, you can find ways to work with them, and you just have to do it if you care about success.
All right, another anonymous attendee. How can we get the meek Democratic leadership to be bold, like Congresswoman Chisholm?
How can you get which leadership?
The meek Democratic leadership to be bold.
Well, look, it has, I don't know. I think the Democratic is as bold as we've ever seen it. They're not a Shirley Chisholm. I think constituents help make their members of Congress bold by weighing in on issues and holding them accountable and being present with them constantly on what they care about. And I think in this day and time, some bold things are taking place by Democrats. Depending on where you live and where you're from, it's up to you to help. If you don't think your Democrats have enough backbone or bold enough, you'll help shape their views if they know that you're there and present and registered to vote. And that's what it takes. It's not going to happen overnight. But believe you me, even the most conservative Democrat is a lot clearer on the future for our planet, on climate, on every other issue, justice, than the most liberal Republican. Okay? And I know that for a fact.
Well, Congresswoman Barbara Lee, I know you do have a lot going on and you've had a really busy day, so we appreciate you taking the time. And I would love for you to give us just some closing remarks.
Oh my goodness. Well, Shirley Chisholm lives. She lives in all of you guys. She lives, her legacy is far and deep. And on this 50th anniversary, I'm leading an effort of her presidential campaign for the Congressional Black Caucus. We're doing the Chisholm Trail. And so we'll be in Brooklyn where she lived. We'll be all over the country. And I hope you all kind of stay woke and listen to where we'll be, and hope to see some of you at some of the places we're going to end up in. And so this is the year of the Chisholm Trail, and we have to lift up and honor and remember Shirley Chisholm, because she was the one who opened those doors for so many of us on so many fronts. And she was a catalyst for change. She was unbought and unbossed. And I had a button made up said, "I is for Chiz."
I like that. Well, thank you so much. And you are so important to us. So, honestly, this is something, I'm on vacation right now and I took some little time off, just to be able to sit with you.
Oh, well, thank you, Angela. I really love being with you and your conversation. If you ever want me to talk to anybody, because this is my life's work, Barbara, Patty, anybody, I'll be willing to do that if you guys need me to do anything, because we got to get people going.
Right. I agree with you.
Before it's too late. So thank you all.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. This was amazing. So thank you guys for joining us. Barbara, I don't know if you had any last words to close us out too.
I'm so thrilled and so excited and motivated and inspired. And I see all the chats, and I'm just thankful for everyone participating. Of course, Congresswoman Barbara Lee, I'm like speechless right now, but we have a lot of work to do. We got to get out there, get on the ground, do what Chisholm would do. What would ask yourself, what would Chisholm do? And if you just ask yourself that one question, I believe that the answers are right there in front of you. So thank you so much. Love you, Congresswoman Barbara Lee.
Love you back. Thank you all.
Good night.
Good night.